The form of the resolution is as follows. Declaring the office of Speaker of the House of Representatives to be vacant. This is the uniparty for the American people watching.
Much to the disgust of her Republican colleagues, Marjorie Taylor Greene today, just a few hours ago, filed a motion to oust Speaker Mike Johnson. Now, there were some questions as to whether Congresswoman Greene was gonna do this, especially considering the fact that you have Democrats who are willing to vote to protect Mike Johnson. After all, he did secure military funding for Ukraine, for Israel. These are the things that Marjorie Greene has taken issue with. And it appears that Democrats have made good on their promise. They did, in fact, protect House Speaker Mike Johnson. And so a vote has already happened. Mike Johnson is safe. The vote was 359 to 43. Now, you heard how she got interrupted as she was calling for a motion to vacate House Speaker Mike Johnson, a deeply conservative House Speaker that Democrats just voted to protect. Well, there's this incredible thing really transpiring right now with the Republican Party with like a long list of Republican lawmakers who are willing to say some pretty vicious things about Marjorie Greene over her disgust with this military funding that's being allocated to wars abroad. So let's take a look at how they treated her as she was calling for the motion to vacate over and over again.
Develop and grow our majority by building upon our resources and expanding. He instead led us to another CR on January 18th, 2024. And got it passed with the support of 207 Democrats. And all Democrat members of the committee voted to advance the measure to the floor. While removing this uniparty speaker will not give the speaker's gavel to the Democrats, which would only happen if Republicans actually vote for Hakeem Jeffries.
Pausing here to deliver some honest truth as we do in our news coverage as well. TYT is facing challenges, guys, as the entire industry is. You know who could make the difference? You. If you hit the join button below, it's gonna make all the difference and keep us in business. We appreciate you, thank you.
So that happened on the House floor. As she was speaking, there was also a press conference with Republican lawmakers taking place, and they lined up one by one to basically taunt Marjorie Taylor Greene, argue that she's an agent of chaos. One member of Congress even referred to her as Moscow Marge over her objections to further funding Ukraine's defense against Russia. By the way, Ukraine has lost 2 more territories, and that followed the United States appropriating more money to that war effort. Just something I thought I would bring up since it's not really something the US press wants to focus on in order to encourage our government to keep funding a war that seems to have no real end in sight. But nonetheless, there is this very real civil war playing out within the Republican Party, although only 43 people voted along with Marjorie Greene, or 43 including Marjorie Greene, in order to oust House Speaker Mike Johnson. So when Marjorie Greene refers to it as a uniparty, I think when it comes to military funding, it very much is a uniparty. And I think that she might have deluded herself, as Democrats have deluded themselves in the past, in thinking that there were members in her own party who actually had objections with funding forever wars, or wars happening outside of the United States, having nothing to do with the United States. And so Greene tried and failed to get Johnson to bend to her will before calling to ouster him. Her move came after a 2-day stretch of meetings this week with Johnson, in which she tried to negotiate a series of demands in exchange for not calling the ouster vote. Among the demands were cutting off all future US aid to Ukraine, defunding the Justice Department, and imposing a 1% across the board cut on all spending bills if lawmakers are unable to negotiate a deal to fund the government in September. Now, that attempt had zero chance of succeeding, as reported by NBC News. Johnson allies plan to immediately move to table or kill Greene's vacate motion, two GOP sources said. Now, obviously, this was before the vote took place. It's already been killed, as I mentioned earlier. But Johnson's GOP allies are in a strong position to beat back Greene's efforts, given that Democratic leaders said on April 30th that their rank and file members will help dismiss Greene's motion to vacate the speaker's chair. So one other thing I should note is that while Marjorie Greene was on the House floor calling for a motion to vacate, apparently, according to the New York Times, Republicans lined up on the House floor to shake Johnson's hand and pat him on the back. It's like, thanks, buddy. You worked real hard to ensure that we could deliver to our defense contractors. You really, really did us a solid. We've got your back. Yes, the uniparty stands tall, okay? So they're doing that as Marjorie Greene is calling for a motion to vacate. And look, Marjorie Greene, I find to be an incredibly unsavory person. And sometimes she doesn't think through what she's doing or saying. Okay, I'm trying to be as generous to her as possible in how I word this, because I do think that it's important to have members of Congress who actually have some interest in pumping the brakes when it comes to military funding for other war efforts outside of the United States. Okay, yes, I'm talking about Ukraine. Yes, I'm talking about Israel. I'm certainly a lot more open to helping Ukraine, but I'm not open to a blank check with no end in sight. And no one's asking any questions about what is the plan. Is it really feasible for Ukraine to win this war? And if so, how? Like, these are legitimate questions. These are finite resources that are being funneled not just to Ukraine or to Israel. Like, let's keep it real. This is a sneaky way to redistribute wealth from the bottom to the top, from US taxpayers to weapons manufacturers. So when we talk about things like the Israel lobby, as it pertains to our funding of this war on Gaza, it's not just about what the Israel lobby wants, which of course consists of evangelicals and all sorts of religious zealots who think all sorts of crazy things about what that land is really meant for. No, it's also about how the money that gets allocated for these war efforts ends up being funneled straight into the pockets of the weapons manufacturers and the defense contractors. So I like the fact that she's willing to question these things. Smearing her as Moscow Marge is laughable to say the least. Honestly, I haven't really seen much from Marjorie Greene to indicate that she's a loyalist to Putin or Russia. But she does seem to have a problem, as many on the America First side say, the voters at least say, that, hey, you know what? We actually do want to improve our country with the resources that we are paying into taxes. Can we please do a little more of that and a little less of funding wars abroad? I think that's a legitimate point. But it is interesting how you'll see members of both sides of the aisle come together to squash any member of Congress who has an issue with the blank checks for wars abroad. And look, I get that a lot of people in the audience think that the effort to help Ukraine is a noble one and they're fully on board, fully in favor. And I totally get that perspective. I just don't think there's really a plan in place or a genuine assessment to see if Ukraine has a chance of winning this war. They keep losing territory and we're allocating hundreds of billions of dollars to that effort. And the longer it goes on and the more territory Ukraine loses, the more I start to wonder, hey, those reports that came out a year ago indicating that the US didn't want Ukraine to engage in peace negotiations because they wanted this war or to use this war to weaken Russia. It looks like there might be some credibility to that argument or to those reports. Anyway, I just hate seeing all these innocent people dying. I think that people are also right in noting that maybe the opportunity for peace negotiations between Ukraine and Russia are over, because in the beginning, Russia was losing the war and was definitely much more open to engaging in peace talks. I don't think Putin's really interested anymore. He's now winning the war. So I don't know what the real solution is, but I don't have any problem with any lawmaker, whether they're a Democrat or Republican, calling into question whether allocating this money for war efforts makes sense. So she lost today. She lost big time. And I think it's a big wake-up call for her, but I do wonder what the ramifications will be for the Democratic Party. I wonder what the ramifications will be for Republicans who basically did what they needed to do to protect House Speaker Mike Johnson. For Democrats, they were fear-mongering about Mike Johnson as soon as he was elected into that leadership role. Oh, he's a religious zealot. He's dangerous for the country. Oh my God, we can't believe it. We're in so much trouble with him as the House Speaker. But we're gonna vote to protect him from getting ousted? I don't know. Are Democratic voters gonna care about that? They might not. They might not even be fully aware of what went down today, depending on how this story is reported or how it's framed in the press. But there's that side, and then there's also the Republican side who will have to essentially deal with confrontations from Republican voters who have grown increasingly disgusted with what the US is willing to fund in wars abroad. So we'll see what the fallout is gonna be, if there's any fallout at all. But I do think that there are voters on both sides of the political aisle who are calling the military funding into question, and more importantly, are calling the uniparty feel that we have in this country as it pertains to certain political issues. They're calling that into question. And I'm glad to see that they are, because I do think that's a problem, especially in a democracy when voters are supposed to have actual options. When it comes to war funding, when it comes to what the State Department is up to, it certainly does feel like we don't have many options. Seems like both parties are usually in cahoots.
If you enjoyed this video, that's because of our members. They make us independent, they make us strong, and they make us honest. Become a member today by hitting the join button below.